Hello and welcome to this new episode of Daughters of Narcissistic Mothers podcast. Today we're talking about how to navigate a visit from your vulnerable, or most commonly referred to as covert, narcissistic mother, following the question of a listener. If you've listened to the love bombing episode 2 weeks ago, you might remember that the email had 2 questions in it. I addressed the love bombing one, so I now will address the second question. And I'm just going to quote the email here for the question. I loved your episode about boundaries for when you visit your mother and family in your old home, and I plan to implement some of those techniques. To take it further, how does one handle an in-person visit with a vulnerable narcissist who tries to make you feel guilty for any boundaries you try to impose? So that was the question. So again, thank you so much for the question. And yes, you can also go back and listen to the episode of how to handle a visit at your old home, so in your mother's house, as that has a few tips that can be applicable to both situations. But today I want to go specific on when it's your mother that comes visit. And I want to speak specifically to the vulnerable narcissist because they are the most subtle, and often a lot of their tactics are difficult to spot in the moment. And this can lead us to feel like everything is fine, and that it is just maybe, it's just maybe you being difficult or seeing things, but actually everything is fine. Because again, the techniques are so subtle that you mightn't actually really be able to point the finger as to what your mother is truly doing that's, not on. And this can often be aggravated by the fact that others who are close to you might not see what you see, So again, causing you to feel alone in all of this, because even if you start seeing what's happening, maybe other people around you don't. And that can be confusing and a lonely place to be. I'm not going to go through all the aspects of a vulnerable narcissist today. To know more about it, you can listen to episode 34, 15 Signs Your Mother is a Covert Narcissist. So that has the full description of what a vulnerable narcissist is and how to identify it. Truly understanding if your mother is a vulnerable narcissist can really help you to see the veiled abusive behavior. Very often we may feel hurt, but we don't fully spot all the behaviors as we might be used to it. It's your mother, you've lived with her all your life, and it's easy to get to think that that's just her being her, and you don't actually spot it as a behavior that is abusive, and yet it leaves you feel it makes you feel miserable in some way. So the more you can understand what actually is that behavior, the easier it is then to protect from it, really. The main point to note about the vulnerable narcissistic mother is that she's subtle in her behavior, and it's often hard to really put your finger on what she's doing that is abusive. Yes, she can leave you feeling miserable, exhausted, crushed with guilt, as the question also say, like the fact that any boundary you try to set, they respond with guilt tripping. So that's one thing. And she can leave you feeling frustrated and lonely, as we said. So you might not be aware fully of how she does it, or what is she even truly saying that's so bad, and yet after every visit it takes you days or even weeks to recover. This type of narcissist is very emotionally needy. She wants your attention all the time, and often she will seem perfectly justified in needing such attention. She'll have excuses for it that they're sort of hard to argue with very often. From the outside, it may look like she's just a lovely woman in need of well-deserved support. But there's more to it, and you may very well be the only one to see that, because you are the one who grew up with it, and you received all the guilt tripping, all the passive-aggressive remarks, all the shaming, all the veil put-downs, and you are the only one that might be able to spot all of this. You may be the only one who can truly see her behavior changes when she's in public compared to when she's alone with you. That's one other characteristic of a vulnerable narcissist is like that their public face is very different from what you see when you're in a one-on-one. And one of the things that they can actually do is trying to keep you isolated. So you might have had that in a visit when your mother comes visit, and maybe you're there and you have your own, you have your husband there, or you have other relatives or whatever, and she will behave one way, and then maybe she gets you in the kitchen by yourself, and then you're gonna see a completely different behavior in that scenario, because she got you one-on-one, and now she can do whatever without ruining her public face. So let me know if any of this sounds familiar to you, and you can share your experience as always via email with me. The email is in the description of the episode. So what happens when a vulnerable narcissistic mother decides she wants to visit you? There are a few things that you can expect, and of course you will have your own personal experience of this. I'm just going to give you a very quick overview of the main things that might happen in such a visit. So first of all, as we mentioned, she demands your undivided attention for the entire time of the visits. She wants that. So she doesn't care if you have kids, if you have other things to do. She's gonna demand your attention all the time. Every conversation is going to revolve around her. She's gonna do her best to be the one that gets the attention of the room. And she speaks about herself, and if other people are speaking, you might notice that she just dissociates. She doesn't listen, and then she tries to bring the conversation back around her yet again. She will always have a good excuse to visit that seems like she wants maybe to support you, or that she truly misses you, or the other way around, that she needs support really badly. So this can happen, like you may have set a boundary, you may have said that you don't want any visit at a certain time, or that you're very busy or whatever, and she might even say yes at the beginning and kind of seem to be accepting of that, and then at the last minute she rings you or sends you a message saying that she has something for you that she has to give you in person, so that she has to come visit, or that all of a sudden something happened to her and she needs to come because you need to look after something for her or whatever. And so again, guilt, I get that guilt can kick in, and you might give in on the boundary that you had set. If she ran out of excuses, which doesn't happen very often, but it can happen, she may even go all the way for a surprise visit. So despite you having said, no, really, I don't want any visits, she might just arrive. Another point about a visit of this type of mother is that nothing you do to prepare for her visit is ever going to be satisfactory for her or to her. So for example, how you clean the house. You know your mother is coming to visit, and you know she's difficult, and you know that she makes a lot of remarks on a lot of things, and you know that she leaves you exhausted and all that. So what you do, you just spend the entire week cleaning and tidying the house. Or you just make sure you've stocked up the fridge with all the foods that her mother approved. Or you spoke to your kids and you make sure they're going to behave a certain way. So no matter how much you go through all this preparation, which already is exhausting and mentally very draining, she will comment pointedly on all of it. She'll find faults with the excuse that she's your mother, and that she's the only one that can truly give you advice because she does it for your own good, because she knows you so well, and blah blah blah. But she will that happens very often, that she will comment to everything, and she will find they're incredibly good at finding the one little corner that you haven't dusted off, or the one little patch that you haven't painted. I have had clients that have literally repainted rooms because their mothers were coming to visit. So and I get that. I've been there. I have memories of my mother and my grandmother coming to visit me, not together, never together, and me spending about 2 weeks solid, like tidying up everything. And it was like she wasn't in the house 2 seconds and she was already pointing out at what wasn't in place. So I get it. I've been there, and it's extremely frustrating and extremely tiring. Another thing that she will do, she will compete with your priorities for attention. So like if you might have a husband in the house with you, maybe, I don't know if that's applicable to you, but you may have kids perhaps, or you may have work commitments, or you may have, I don't know, you may have a pet, a dog that you need to walk. Like any other priority, any other commitment that you may have, she will compete with that. She wants to be the center of attention, and she doesn't care for the commonsensical, like if you go, but these are my children, I clearly need to pay attention to them. That's not going to be understood. So she will compete with your priorities. She will completely disregard every boundary you try to set. And we're going to talk about this. Stick with it till the end, because there is a way to set boundaries that she can't disregard, or we're going to talk about it later on. So for now, in the regular, like most common way we end up setting boundaries, she will disregard those completely. And she will try another thing, as we said earlier, she will try to isolate you as much as possible to get your attention, get you one-on-one, find excuses to get you one-on-one. I remember, like, one of my mother's favorite would be, oh, we need to get into the car to go to such and such shop, and there's no point in bringing the kids, or there's no point in your husband coming, we just go by ourselves. And it was something that she always needed, or she had to go get a gift for someone back home, or there was always something, and I was the person that was needed, and I had to drive her, and this one-on-one. And that's where then the most challenging conversations would happen. And it would also create a lot of conflict within your home, especially if you have a husband and kids, and having this person that just wants your attention all the time. Then the rest of your family is going to feel like they're not getting any of your attention. You might going to start seeing children acting up in ways that they don't usually, or getting very needy, or like your husband going, what's happening? This is not how you behave usually, seeing you different and not understanding what's happening. So again, she will stir conflict. Maybe not directly, but it's a stirring of conflict within, to create disharmony in your home, so that then she gets her own needs met. And again, share with me if this sounds familiar to you. As I said, I've been there so many times, not only with my mother, because my grandmother is also a good bit of work, but my mother definitely behaved like this in every visit, to the point that, well, I know I am no contact, but even before going no contact, my mother was not welcome in my house for a few years before I actually decided to go no contact. There were no visits, and the last time that she was here, she was told very clearly that just was not going to happen again, because it was just very, very toxic, her behavior when she was in my house. But at the beginning, for a very, very long time, before realizing all this, I was so absorbed and enmeshed with her that I was completely blind to it. I did everything for her. I was completely disregarding and neglecting my husband and my kids and any other priorities, even my work. And I ended up exhausted, miserable after every visit. And it took me so long to recover each time, like so long. It was very, very intense. When I was younger and my mother lived in a different country and she would come back home to visit, I remember my father pointing out to me, you are completely disregarding everything else in your life, and for that week or 2 weeks your life completely revolves around your mother. What is that about? This is not right. It's not gonna be good for you. And I knew it wasn't good for me because how it left me afterwards was destroyed, like completely every time. But I couldn't, obviously, I didn't have any support. I didn't know what maternal narcissism was. I didn't know any of that. I was only a teenager at the time. But it just was really, really intense. So I absolutely get you if you're finding the whole experience really, really difficult every time. If you're dreading it when you get that message or that phone call, I'm coming to visit, and you're like, oh my, really? And your heart sinks. I get that. I really do. Another thing I want to add about vulnerable narcissistic mothers is that this type of behavior can be also of the more grandiose narcissist, as they can have both ways within them. They can have both teams within them, and they can shift from one to another depending on the circumstances. So your mother may be textbook vulnerable narcissist, or she may be a grandiose, like a more, the grandiose narcissist is the one that is more in your face, directly abusive, that is really obvious that she is a narcissistic mother. She could have been also violent with you, like physically abusive, like all of that. But even that type of narcissist can assume the more vulnerable narcissistic behavior during visits, which can be very confusing. So they can shift from one to another depending on their needs, depending on where they are in life. Like if they're going through a more successful patch of life, they may be more grandiose because they feel they have more power, and then they go through a difficult time and they get more vulnerable. Or they do that to get you if you've set boundaries, for example. And then, so if you find that your mother can switch between both and you don't know how to place her, that's just that happens. They can have both teams. So she may very well be sometimes a vulnerable narcissist when she comes to visit. So I just wanted to say that because I have had a few questions about that in recent times, about not knowing exactly where to place your mother. And I've had that because my mother is both. She can shift from one to the other depending on the situation, and sometimes within the same week. So that was very confusing for me. So I get that. So with all that said, what to do? That's the main question. What are we going to do when this type of mother comes visit? It is important to remember that you are under no obligation to accept visits from your mother. I want to say that. If this feels like too much of an intrusion to you, if she's too disrespectful of your boundaries and of your life, you can refuse to have her over. As I said, I didn't go no contact straight away, but I did refuse to have my mother in my house for a couple of years before I got all the way to no contact. So it doesn't make you a bad daughter. For many of my clients, for example, it is easier to go to their mother's house instead of having their mothers coming to visit, because they feel more in control, for example, of the time that they get there and the time that they leave. Have you noticed that sometimes your mother may say, I'm coming for an hour or so, but then she stays there for hours and she doesn't seem to get the point where you're like, I need to get on to do other things now, while she still lingers on and she still talks and she still gets your needs your attention, wants your attention. So if you are in her own house, in her house, you can say that you're leaving at 5, and I mean at 4:45 you're getting your coat on and you're out the door. So it can be more in your control. So that's one way that I know that it does help sometimes. And also it's a way to avoid your mother intruding in your privacy. I know of clients that, you know, their mother just goes around the entire house and goes prying in corners and goes looking into drawers and does things like that. So if you're in her house, she can't do that. So that can be one way to go about this. So I just wanted to mention this as an option, because very often we don't even realize we have that option. We don't realize we're allowed to say, no, you can't come visit. But yes, I can come visit you. And that can bring it more in your control and make it easier. So with that said, if you are having a visit from your vulnerable narcissistic mother, there are a few things to speak to. And there's one most effective thing as well. So I'm going to give you about 8 steps, but number 8 is the one thing, and that's what I was talking about earlier about boundaries and how to set them properly. So when you implement that one thing, everything else gets easier. But I'm going to leave it for last. So keep listening. I'm going to give you a few more before that. So the first thing is identify your mother's behavior for what it is. Okay, gain clarity on the vulnerable narcissist. You can, again, as I said, you can listen to, I believe I said episode 34, the 15th sign of that your mother is a covert narcissist. And this will help you with that crushing feeling that all that goes wrong is your fault, okay? And the guilt. That it's all your fault. Because it's not. It's not your fault. None of it is your fault. That's just the way she is. And the more you can understand that, the more you can separate the two things. Number 2 is remembering that you're not responsible for her. This is the conditioning a narcissistic mother gives you from the start, to feel responsible for her. But you're not. You're not responsible for your mother's emotional state. You're not responsible for your mother, full stop. She was responsible, and she's always going to be responsible for you. That's what being a mother is about. The minute you have those kids, you're responsible for them. And a narcissist doesn't accept that very well. But the other way around, it's not true. We're not responsible for our mothers. We're not responsible for our mother's emotional state, life choices, and any of that. That's her story. Those are her choices. She's been an adult all along. It's nothing to do with you. Okay? So it's not up to you to change everything in your life and home to make her comfortable all the time. If she wants to come visit, she gets you how she finds you, and if she doesn't like it, that's her issue. It has nothing to do with you. If she likes things done differently, she can stay back at her own house, or she can go visit someone else that does things like she likes. But you do you, and you're so allowed to do you. You don't need to do what makes her feel comfortable. And this is not I am not suggesting that you have to be a nasty person and, there's hospitality and all of that. But we're talking about a person here that comes in and it's very disrespectful and intrusive, doesn't respect you, your family, doesn't respect your boundaries. That's what we're talking about. Of course, that when someone is being respectful and nice and you're hosting them in your home, you are gonna do whatever it's possible to make someone feel comfortable within the limit of what you're comfortable doing. That's a completely different thing. Okay, that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about a dysfunctional relationship with a toxic person. So I just wanted to make things clear. I'm not saying you have to be like selfish and nasty. I'm just saying to go all out, like I described earlier, cleaning the house like for 2 weeks, doing all this crazy preparation just because you know that she's gonna complain, just because you know she's gonna treat you bad if things are not the way she wants. That's not on. Okay, so third point is prepare for the visit by having, this is a really important point, by having a clear list of what your priorities are. Okay, it's a lot easier to stick to your priorities when you have clarity about what they are, because when your mother comes in, there's gonna be a level of lack of clarity in your mind and confusion that is gonna come in, because that's, again, it's the conditioning. She's conditioned you to feel confused and need her guidance because that's what she wanted. There can be a level of dissociation when your mother is around, and that is a very common coping strategy. I wasn't aware of that, but I was doing that all the time when my mother was around. So there is a lack of clarity that happens within you. And so if you can have a clear list of what your priorities are, you're gonna be more able to stick to them. So ask yourself, what are the things that are important to you that you don't want to leave behind when your mother is around? Okay? And it's not even that you must not leave behind, as in there are obligations, but also things that you don't want. If you every day, for example, go for a lovely walk, and that's one thing that you really like doing, or you go for your run, or you go for your yoga class, whatever it is. So it's not an obligation really, but it's something that really makes you feel great, and you know it, and it's your ritual, and it helps you so much. That should go into that list. You have the right to keep doing those things that make you feel good. So these things, this list is the list of non-negotiables. That's what these things are called. Okay, these are your non-negotiables, meaning there's no room for negotiation on this. You're not gonna negotiate. You know that at 9 in the morning you go for your walk. That's just it. It's not gonna be like, there's not gonna be anything that your mother will do or say that is going to change that, if you've decided that that is in your list of non-negotiables. So you create a list. That's before your mother comes. Okay, so when you hear that your mother is coming for a visit, you do that. If your mother can give you very short-term notice, well, have your list there, and you know that those are your things. You prepare once, and you know that you have your non-negotiables that no matter what, you're gonna stick with, which is great for every visit, to be honest. It's not just with your mother. Even when someone that is really nice that comes to visit, it's great to have a list of things that you know are important to you, that you're gonna stick to no matter what. Because that just keeps your energy in a good place, keeps things running smoothly, and then you don't have to catch up with things after the visit is over. So that's in general, but definitely is fundamental when we're talking about someone like a vulnerable narcissist coming in your home. Point number 4, have time for yourself. Okay, really important. As I mentioned, this should be included in your non-negotiables list. Time for yourself. Make sure you have time to be with yourself. That grounds you and keeps your batteries charged. This is important, even if it's a short visit. Okay, so make sure that in your non-negotiable you have moments of time when you're going to be relaxed with yourself, and you can reground, sort of. Get yourself reconnected with yourself. Breathe. Whatever it is that you do. Again, go for a walk if that's an option. Something that is just you. And also, if it's a long visit, make sure that this time, and this could be 2 separate portions of time, but you also have time just with your, for example, your kids and your husband. If that's the case, if you have a husband and kids or a partner with you, make sure that you have time that is just with that when your mother is not there or included. Do your best to figure out a way, get creative. Here's where you get creative. I don't know your personal life. I'm not working one-on-one with you. If we were working one-on-one, we would go into all the details as to how this can happen in your very specific personal situation. But I'm just speaking generic. So it's up to you now to get creative and see how can you do that within the context of your visit. Like what we did, for example, myself and my husband, when I had visitors in the house, when I had my grandmother in or my mother, we'd get up earlier. So I know I had time with him before my mother or grandmother got up. We also had moments when maybe one of us brought said person in town, and the other stayed with the kids, so that like I could get some time with them. Or like you can play around and get creative. But it's really important to put it in your non-negotiables, because it's going to strain all the relationships. It's going to create conflict within your family home. If you don't, within your own home, if you don't have time just with them, even if it's a short little time, but that's enough to help. Going upstairs and reading your bedtime story to your kids without your mother, that's the putting the kids to bed. I'm doing it, and I'm doing it with my kids. You're not included in this. You stay down, and things like that. So make sure that time for yourself and time with whoever loved one is in your life that lives with you usually has your attention, but now there's your mother in the picture. Make sure you have time, and both these things are in your non-negotiable list. Point number 5, accept that you're never going to have the place narcissist ready. Okay, so as we said earlier, she's gonna criticize, so she will find faults in the state of your house, even if you spent a week cleaning. If you went to the lengths of the earth to get her favorite food, she probably just became allergic to it in the last week, and you should have known. And I'm being sort of sarcastic here, but that's just what happens, and I have seen it happen. I've stocked my fridge with pasta because my mother was coming, and to the best of my memory, she was eating pasta all the time, and all of a sudden she is turned gluten intolerant, and I'm like, when did that happen? Last night on the plane coming over? But yes, so I have seen that happening in my own life. So that kind of preparation, it's pretty much a lot of waste of energy, like really, because it's never gonna bring the place, or you're never going to be able to tick all the boxes, because she will find the one box you haven't ticked. So prepare in a different way. Save yourself all that effort, and instead prepare by setting strong foundations for your nervous system. Do whatever practices and rituals that help you, that settle you and support your system before a visit. Again, if we were going one-on-one, we were working one-on-one, you would have all the tools at this point, and you would know which are the practices that work in what situations for you. So we could go specific on all of that. But in general, figure out what works for you, what settles you, what helps your system, and do that. Prepare yourself that way. Charge your batteries to the full. Be so grounded that whatever she wants to trigger is not actually going to work that well, for her, because you are just feeling so damn good. That's a really good way of preparing for such a visit. And then choose one practice that you can easily do during the visit. Okay, the one that works best for you. I know that if I breathe in my belly, that kind of settles me. That really works all the time. Or another thing, it's like if I go outside, being outside in nature for me helps. So those are the things that I know that I can do in my situation. I can do, and so those are my choice for when. At this point, when anyone comes visit, because my mother doesn't come, as I mentioned, but my grandmother still comes visit. So, and although I can manage her a lot better now, and she's not as toxic as my mother is for me, but still I need that time. So I still need my breathing, and I still need the time outside, in nature for myself. So I know those are the things that work for me. So figure out what works for you, and then use it. Something that can be used when she's around, during the visit, and that is easy for you to access. The next point that is really, really important is be kind with yourself. Okay, really important, because you are gonna get triggered. Triggering you is your narcissistic mother's game. Okay, when she triggers you, she gets a reaction, she gets her emotional needs met. That's what she wants. She's a pro at it, and she's conditioned you to respond to to her pushing the buttons. She knows all those buttons. So with all the preparation in the world, some triggering is going to happen. Okay, so be kind with yourself when that happens. It's not a setback, you're not being bad, you're not being the usual disaster. There's none of that. No point in beating yourself up if you get triggered. Instead, take each moment as a learning, okay? As a precious lesson for next time. Oh, this is what she did this time to trigger me. Well, she's not gonna get me next time, because now I know. The next point, if possible, speak to the people close to you about this. I've had a few clients saying, "Oh, but my husband doesn't really get it," and I know sometimes they don't. So sometimes they really don't. But if there is any openness at all, explain your situation, explain how it makes you feel, without necessarily blaming, pointing the fingers, none of that. Just explain how it makes you feel. If your kids are of an age that is appropriate to speak to them about this, and again, that's your own choice and decision, of course, but I found it very useful in my own experience to explain to them about certain behaviors so that they understand what a vulnerable narcissist is. They understand what's happening when granny comes visit. They understand why you might behave in certain ways. This makes the whole thing a lot easier and safer for everyone, but most especially for you, because you'll have someone that actually is beginning to get what's happening, is beginning to understand what's going on. If you don't have any of that, as in if you live on your own and your mother comes visit, if you have a close friend that you can speak to, that can be very helpful, someone that can understand your situation, maybe someone that knows your mother, knows the way your mother behaves, so and again, it's not about having a blaming bitching session about your mother, but it is someone that you at least can speak to. That can be very helpful. And if again none of that is applicable, ask for support, find someone that can understand the situation and support you. An appropriate women's circle, a mentor, a therapist, someone that resonates with you, that is prepared on the topic, okay? Because you don't need to go through this alone. It can be very intense to go through it alone. I know it because I've done it alone a lot. So yeah, finding support and speaking to whoever is close to you can be very, very helpful in this. So now, point number 8, and as I mentioned at the beginning, the most important point of it all. Not that the ones previously spoken are not important, but this is like really going to make the biggest difference. So here we go. Set your boundaries. And I know you may say to this, I've done it. Believe me, I set my boundaries, but she overstepped them all the time. Or she makes me feel guilty about it and blah, blah, blah. And I get that. And the thing is, she always will overstep your boundaries. Always. Like, she will never respect them. She wouldn't be a narcissist if she did respect them. Let's say you tell your mother, you need to go put your kids to bed now. It's time that you go put your kids to bed. She will likely say, oh yeah, of course, yeah, it's time to put them to bed. I see they're tired. But then she will keep on talking to you. Or she will keep demanding your attention in some way. So you may actually think you've set your boundary by telling her that you have to put your kids to bed. And that she will understand that that's a boundary. I mean, another person would. If someone is not a narcissist and you say, I have to go put my kids to bed, the other person's going to go, oh yeah, that's great. And she's going to just do her own things while you do that. But this is a narcissist we're talking about. And you're relying on her to get it. And that is never going to happen. Okay? That's instead, set a boundary for yourself. Have it on your own non-negotiable list that at 7, you're gonna go put your kids to bed. Full stop. That's it. There's no explanation, no justification needed. At 7, you just get up and go. Because that's your boundary. You have put a boundary to yourself that at that time, that's what you're doing. That's it. Okay? In the same way, for example, to tell your mother you have things to do, maybe commitments at work or whatever, that won't work. So you can tell your mother, yeah, we can have breakfast together, but at 10, I really need to go to work. And you think that that's a boundary. That's not. Because she's not going to get it. She doesn't give 2 craps about you having a commitment to work. She has her emotional needs to meet. She has her own needs to meet. And that's all she sees. And that's what a narcissist does. That's how they operate. It's not a conscious thing. It's subconscious. But that's just how they work it. So even if she said yes to you, because That's the conscious part. The subconscious is going to keep on pushing to get what she wants. So again, set yourself a time when you go do what you need to go do, and stick with it no matter what she says or does. If she gets upset and threatens to leave, well, then so be it. She won't really. She won't. But like, she'll threaten. That's the guilt tripping. Remember that everything that they do are tactics, okay? So usually they try a few, and they know what works with you. So if telling you that she's gonna leave, if she knows that works with you, you've never really tested it fully, because usually that works for you and you just fall back. Or if guilt tripping works for you, like, I know my mother has always threatened to leave. It was the one thing. That's it. I'm gone. And I so believed her, because like, she did leave me very often when I was a child. Like, she was never around. Actually, she neglected me so much that I had an abandonment wound that was like ginormous. So I really get how that works. Like, that really worked for me. Every time she said that, okay, that's it, I'm not gonna be your mother anymore and I'm gonna leave, I mean, my whole entire system went in a panic and I had to do whatever she wanted. So I never tested it, but I did get to a point where I did test it, because I was a bit more of a grown up, and she didn't go anywhere. So again, they'll try a few different things. You stick to your boundary, the one that you've set for yourself. Okay? If you know she will be a nightmare to have in the house, tell her you can't host. And again, I know that that's a boundary set more to her, like, but it's the way you say. You're not gonna just say, oh mom, I don't know, I don't think I have the space, well, I haven't made the bed, because she can find a heap of ways around that. She can say, but I don't mind, I'll sleep on the couch, or I'll bring my own bed clothes, or don't worry, I'll help you tidying up and making the bed. And she just keeps playing you until you eventually say yes. What you do there is you've set your boundaries with yourself. That is like, you have decided that you're not going to host for your mother. That's it. So when she rings you and tells you that she's coming, you're like, that's great. There is such and such bed and breakfast or such and such hotel. Book into that, because you cannot stay in the house. And when she asks why, an explanation and justification, that's just it. You can't. That's it. That's it. There is no justification, no explanation. I'm not having this conversation with you. If you want to come, this is the hotel. That's the only way you're going to be able to come visit. I actually went so far as to getting rid of all the guest beds in my house. So that's just it. I don't have a lot of space anyways, so it wasn't very hard. I think I definitely don't have a lot of guest bedrooms. I have known. But I had arrangements at the beginning. I was trying to create situations which were putting me in an absolute disaster. I had to like completely give up the girls' room and sitting room where they play and we maybe relax in the evening and things, just to turn it into a bedroom for whoever was coming visit. That's not happening anymore. I just got rid of the bed, so there's no need to give a lot of explanation. There's not even a conversation. So again, that way is how you set a boundary to yourself. You create the conditions within your own life, within your own system, and then you stick with that. You're not trying to give them conditions, because they're not going to accept any of that. Another example is, if you know, because I'm going to mention this because I know this has been mentioned by a few of my clients, so I just want to bring it in. If you know that things go downhill when alcohol is involved with your mother, which I know is the case, in there's many cases like that, and I have seen that in my own life with my own family, have known in the house, just don't have it. Again, you can't tell her not to drink. We've tried that didn't work. But you can have a house that doesn't have any bottle of alcohol in it. So again, that's the boundaries you set to yourself. In those days that your mother is coming, there's not going to be any alcohol. It means you're just going to do a bit of an alcohol-free couple of days yourself, and you're going to be the better for it. If she brings it as that does happen, oh look, I just brought you these bottles of wine, just for the days as a gift. Oh, so lovely, thank you mom, that's amazing. And then you go and you empty them in the sink, because you've set a boundary to yourself. There's not going to be alcohol in the house, because you know what the consequences are. So again, you're not trying to set a boundary to her, you're setting boundaries to yourself. It's always about what's in your control. You cannot control her, you cannot, but you can control a lot in your own environment, a lot about what like everything that you do you can control. So bring it always back in your control. If you have a doubt as to how to set boundaries this way in specific situations, that's the bottom line. Bring it back in your control. Don't try and expect that don't expect that she will get it, that she will understand it, that saying it in a little bit of a sort of subtle way, not to hurt her feelings, that she will get it. She won't get it. And even if she does, she'll pretend not to get it, because she wants to get her needs met, and that's all. Okay, so to set boundaries around yourself, no explanation, no justification. Remember, anytime you try to explain or justify, you're giving her ammunition. You're giving her things she can argue with until she has you guilt tripped or convinced to do, or gaslighted to do what she wants, into doing what she wants. So no explanation, no justification. And the other thing is no reaction. No reaction meaning do your best not to get upset and show it. Just stick with your boundary as if you were made of stone. Okay, so if you've done whatever, you've set a boundary, and your mother is just still pushing, and this would usually trigger you and make you get really upset and like lose it in front of everyone. I've done it. I smashed plates in this was not in my own kitchen, it was in my family home place, but I have lost it a few times. Then they won, like when you give them a reaction like that, if she gets you that dysregulated to the point that you give her such a reaction, she's got her needs met. That's what she wanted. I know what that was like. My grandmother's goal was to get me as angry as possible, and somehow that would always make her, like, you could see her, she'd be pleased then. That's just whatever she had, whatever emotional need she needed met was working that way. So as much as possible, show no reactions to all her teasing, to all her taunting, to all her pushing buttons, to all her put downs. It's like, you're made of stone. This is something you gotta practice. I know it doesn't happen that easy, especially at the beginning. It's one of those things that you fake it till you make it, and then you just go process it somewhere else where you're safe. That's why having that support can be helpful, so you don't react in front of your mother, and then you need to go to whoever is supporting you and just process and unpack all the emotions that have been triggered. That's how we do it in a healthy, safe way. Because when you do it in front of your mother, again, you're giving her a ton of ammunition to get to you. So boundary setting formula that works. Set boundaries around yourself. No explanation, no justification, no reaction. If she gets upset, that's all her issue. If she gets a reaction from you, she got what she wanted. So this is really, really important. And this is a radically different way to set boundaries, and it takes some getting used to. But in my own experience, in my personal life, and in what I've observed with all my clients, this is the only way that works. With a vulnerable narcissist and with every type of narcissist. That's the only way that you have to empower yourself to set boundaries. And I know it can sound challenging, especially for all the guilt that may be triggered in you, and I get it. And a vulnerable narcissist is an absolute pro at guilt tripping. That's what they do best. So again, the invitation is to get support so that you can gently unpack the guilt patterns in your system. But in the meantime, try your best to set boundaries to yourself and hold strong, because this will make a huge difference to you and in your life. And remember, for the entirety of the visit, remember one thing that's really important. These are not my words. This is Dr. Gabor Mate shares it this way, but I find it is such a clear way to explain it. So anything that your mother is going to trigger in you, you've got the ammunition in yourself. So that gunpowder is in you. And your mother can't trigger what's not loaded within you. That's why she's conditioned you from when you were a little child to be triggerable that way. So when you get support and you actually start unpacking all those triggers, you unload all of that gunpowder, you get rid of it. It's gone. It's not there anymore. Then she comes and then she starts pushing all those buttons and nothing is happening. It's like a funny tickle instead of like a jab or a stab with a knife, like it feels otherwise. So the more you do your inner work, the less you're gonna get triggered. And also the more you do your inner work, the more empowered and strong you're gonna feel every time that you set a boundary around yourself. So it's gonna get easier and easier, but you can't expect her to change. It's not her work, as in, I know it's her responsibility, and she's the one that needs to do some work on herself for sure, but that's not something you can control. So the only thing you can do is do your own work on yourself. Again, never to fix yourself because you're broken or faulty, but because you deserve to be happy, you deserve to have a beautiful life experience, you deserve all of that, you deserve to feel at ease and relaxed and experience joy and all of that. You deserve all of that. So the more you do your work, the more you're going to be able to access all of that, and the less she's going to trigger you, and the more your boundaries are going to be strong and unbreakable. So the invitation is always to find the support that resonates with you. If you feel called to work with me, there are women's circles that I'm running specific for maternal narcissism and mother wounds, and there's also the one-on-one program with me, Inner Transformation Healing Mother Wounds program, where you get to work one-on-one with me. So there are the links in the description of the episode for both these offerings. So if you feel called to work with me, that's how you can work with me. If you don't feel called to work with me, that's okay too. But the invitation remains to get support, because that's definitely going to help you. And I speak from experience on that. So with that said, I'm going to send you lots of love, and bye for now.